this is where I'm going to be pretty blunt. Screens should never be in kids' bedrooms overnight. And if you're allowing that, I would highly encourage you to shift that practice. That's a recipe for disaster.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, the podcast that helps overwhelmed dads conquer stress, build confidence, and become the father their family brags about. Join Drew Solon, a leadership coach and father of 5, and Ed Gow Jr., a fatherhood advocate and contributor to the Good Men Project, as we guide you through the journey of fatherhood. We'll show you how to connect deeply with your family, manage your time and energy better, and master tools to become the dad you want to be. Let's get started. What if the biggest impact of screens on your child isn't what they're watching, but what they're missing? Research consistently shows that the relationship between screens and children's well-being is more complex than many headlines suggest, with excessive screen use is linked to increased stress, sleep disruption, anxiety, and lower well-being. Studies also show that moderate, purposeful technology use isn't necessarily harmful. The strongest predictor of healthy outcomes isn't screen time alone. It's what screens are replacing and how they're being used. For dads, this is great news. It means the goal isn't perfection or panic. The goal is helping kids build healthy habits and keeping connection at the center. So, you are watching Dad Central, a parenting podcast to build confidence in fatherhood. Our show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care, because Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men show care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. And we always want you to send in your questions. We'd like to answer them during the show. So send your questions to the email address podcast@dadcentral.ca. And also, if you subscribe to the show, love you. If you haven't subscribed to the show, we still love you, but we would love you more if you subscribe to the show. So wherever you're watching or listening to this, subscribe. Drew, I know this is one of your fun subjects. Screens, stress, and kids. What dads need to know without panic. What are your thoughts before we get into it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think we're taking an interesting approach in this conversation. But I think it's a really good one. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean that, everything that somebody hears they'll necessarily be able to apply. But I already know, based on our notes and what we're going to talk about, that I think there's a great approach that this conversation is going to bring forward, and things that I've learned that I think, that's healthy. And I've demonstrated at times, but sometimes I recognize there's an internal reaction as opposed to more effective response. So, and we'll get into that through the conversation. So, yeah, it's good to talk about these things, because it's all around, it's affecting us all, and they're not going away. So you need to have strategies on how to navigate the reality while remaining connected and in a healthy relationship. And that, to me, is ultimately the goal. So if you're new to the show or new to the podcast, our goal is to have real conversations that are on the challenges or the needs that we as parents have, especially dads, and to give you something very practical and tangible that you can take, listen to the podcast, and you can go apply it immediately, and it improves your fatherhood or helps you reach your goals. So thanks for being here, and we hope you get some value.
Yeah, this is jam-packed because there's a lot of stuff we're going to cover in a short amount of time. So I suggest you may want to watch this or listen to this a few times. So what we're going to cover today is, why are we so bothered about screens? Also, what research actually says. Then, what kids need more than screen limits, practical strategies for dads. And then finally, we're going to give the goal isn't less screen time, it's more life. So Drew, let's kick it off with segment one. Segment one, all about why are we so worried about screens?
Well, I think screens are everywhere. I think we see and hear some of the decisions being made around limiting things like social media and bans on social media, which I fully support and wholeheartedly agree with. Decisions of school boards to limit screens in grade 8 or lower. Again, I fully support and celebrate that those decisions are being made. But they're also woven into the daily life of friendships, entertainment, learning. and there are some fear-based messages that I don't know if they oversimplify. I think what they do is they bring light to the fact that there's real dangers, and we have to be mindful of these, but we also don't need to be overreactive. We need to be thoughtful and intentional. And I think that's where we go. So why is there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of issues that can be exacerbated by using a tool in ways that are it's never meant to, or ways that are just potentially destructive. So if you're a listener, we got a couple questions for you to reflect on. you know and the questions are, what is concerning you the most about screens in your child's life? Are you experiencing things where there's too much gaming happening? Your concerns about social media and its impact? Does that relate to bullying? Does it relate to other mental health concerns? Or are you really concerned about there's no family connection as a result of screens? You're trying to get through to your child and they're always with a face in a screen. Those are very legitimate concerns. So just think about it. What's your greatest concern when it comes to screens? And the message we want to leave you with is that screens, like any valuable tool, you could say they aren't inherently good or bad. The impact really depends on how, why, and how much they're being used. And that's where I think we want to go next.
Okay, let's jump to our next segment. What research actually says.
Yeah, Ed, let's go back and forth. Why don't you start?
Sure. So, areas of concern. First of all, sleep. Research consistently shows that screen use before bedtime can interfere with sleep and quality and duration. So, and actually, my holistic nutritionist, she's very much on my back that before I go to bed, at least 1 hour before I go to bed, turn off the screens. No screen access an hour before you go to sleep.
Absolutely.
So that's something I practice. And then take a look at your own child. Are they getting enough sleep? And our devices staying in bedrooms overnight, because if they're staying in bedrooms overnight, there's a good possibility they're going on those devices overnight, which is interrupting a good 7 hours of sleep that they need. So,
Yeah, I would say this is where I'm going to be pretty blunt. Screens should never be in kids' bedrooms overnight. And if you're allowing that, I would highly encourage you to shift that practice. That's a recipe for disaster.
all right, lead into our next one.
Stress and anxiety. Look, constant notifications, create this idea of never fully off, or you're always waiting for the next hit of dopamine. These devices are built by PhD neuroscientists, neurolinguists. Like, they know the ins and outs of how our brain works, and they're designed to capture and keep your attention, right? But there's no conscience there. It's about, here's how the brain works. How do you capitalize on it? So you have to recognize that they're designed to keep you engaged. And this is problematic if we don't have conscious decisions on how these are in our world. The other thing that happens is social comparison, absolutely increases anxiety, especially among teens. I mean, we don't even have to go into the research. It's so proven. And as a coach, one of the things I like to say is, comparison is a trap. And all that we're constantly doing when we have these images constantly bombarding us, huge comparison happens. And if you don't have a foundation or support around that, you can easily get pulled down a rabbit hole. Hey, it's happened to me, right? And I'm sure it's happened to you listening, and you know that this is true. So stress and anxiety are exacerbated. So that's one of the what the research says.
Yeah, I'll end it off here with attention and emotional regulation. Fast paced digital stimulation can make boredom feel uncomfortable, let alone with adults. But a lot of kids, if they don't, they want things yesterday. And if it doesn't happen yesterday, they get bored. Everything has to be quick, quick, quick. What? There are not many young people, because of technology, need things now. If it isn't now, they get bored or they feel it's not the worth. Kids need opportunities to practice patience, creativity, and self regulation. So it's really important. The attention and self regulation, emotional self regulation, when we're talking about this subject, is critical.
Yeah, Ed, I was talking with the teachers at my son's school, and they have to redesign how they lesson plan around the fact that kids cannot sit still for very long anymore, right? And I'm not necessarily saying adapting your lesson planning to to keep people engaged is a bad thing, but the fact that kids can't sit still anymore because they're constantly used to this dopamine induction with these screens, instant immediate gratification. And I think sometimes, you know us as parents are the problem. It's like we they say they want something, and what do? We drop everything and we just give them what they want, instead of having boredom, discomfort, patience be a part of how we parent, especially around this sort of screen thing. So it's challenging for sure. The reality is kids benefit from learning opportunities, maintaining friendships, creative expression, social support communities, and boredom, like they do. So they need this stuff. So I would say the issue isn't simply screen time; it's screen quality and balance with no screens.
All right, let's go to our next segment. What kids need more than screen limits? What do they need?
Well, they need connection, just like every human needs connection. Hey, but a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this as well, we focus on the rules, the limits, or the monitoring of the screens in the absence of the connection. We had Jack Armstrong on the podcast years ago, and I still remember to this day, he has a great, bulletin board statement. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. Rules with relationship equals results. And this is the core piece. If you have these rules, limits, monitoring without relationship, you're going to get rebellion. You're going to get pushback. You're going to get, they're going around your back. And so the reality is that research proves that strong parent-child relationships are one of the most protective factors for mental and emotional well-being. So if you're a parent, a dad who's listening to this, here's some questions for you. How often are you entering your child's digital world with curiosity, with empathy, with kindness, with respect? Right? Do you know what games they love? Do you know who they follow online? Do you know what they enjoy creating? The goal here is come alongside them, get curious, be interested, and then you have the opportunity to create conversations. You can ask questions like, hey, can you show me your favorite game? What's funny, or what do you admire about that creator? What do you like most about this app? What's the most frustrating part about it? Right? At the end of the day, the more you enter their world, the kids are more likely to accept limits from parents who really understand their world. I'm going to share one brief story. It's from a different era, but I think the principle still applies. So back when I was 13, I was into some music that maybe may not have had been the best influence on me. So I went and I bought a Method Man CD. And so my mom, in her infinite wisdom, was like, "Oh, Drew, tell me more about this. Tell me more about this music." And I was like, "Well, I don't really know that much. Friends listen to it, but I think it's popular at school, so that's why I bought it. That's the truth." And so she's like, "Do you mind if I listen to it?" I said, "Whatever, mom. Yeah, go ahead." So she went, she listened to the Method Man CD. Then she came back to me and she said, "Okay, Drew, hey, thanks for letting me listen to it. Can we sit down and talk about what I heard?" I said, "Yeah, okay." I didn't really feel like I had a choice. So I was like, "Okay, mom." And she was direct and blunt. "Hey, here's what some of the lyrics talk about. Here are the themes and messages that came up. Here's what it talks about in terms of how you treat other people." And Drew, based on who you are and the values that we hold, I don't think these messages really help you become more of who I know you to be. And so she said, "Look, it's your CD. You can do with it what you want, but I just want you to know I don't think that this is the best music for you to listen to." Didn't demand, didn't take it away, didn't create a restriction. She left it to me to decide. I wouldn't be sharing this story today if it didn't leave a significant impression, but also help me with this process of decision making. I feel like if dads can do a similar thing around this idea of screens and this idea of what kids are getting into and help them make critical decisions or critically analyze and think about what they're doing and ground them in principles and values, you'll have more success in creating and maintaining connection with our kids through some of this screen challenges.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that story.
No problem.
Lot of value in that. A lot of value in that. Let's move to our next segment. Practical strategies for dads.
Yeah, really, we're asking you a bunch of questions in this episode. So before worrying about the screens, ask things like: Is my child sleeping enough? Is my child getting enough physical activity? Are they spending enough time with family, friends, and other social connections? Are they keeping up with school responsibilities? Are they still gainfully involved in extracurricular activities that are meaningful or that they care about? If a lot of these important areas of their life are healthy, then screen use, if they do deeply get engaged screens, may be less concerning. Now, of course, the caveat to this is, well, depending on their age, right? I think, and the research would be clear, that young children definitely do not need screens and should not be on screens for any length of period of time. The only thing would be around educational and elements that are aligned with the right timing. So I would say if you can answer positively to those questions, screen use may not be a huge concern, especially if you're modeling some of healthy screen use and stress regulation yourself as well. Ed, you want to talk about strategy two?
Yeah, strategy number 2, create tech-free rituals. And again, we had mentioned some rituals, I think, earlier on in this episode or a previous episode, but things like family meals, bedtime routines, walking the dog, Saturday morning breakfast, driving conversations. Short story. I always remember doing a sharing session with a bunch of dads, and one dad saying, he sees his young son, like who was 2 years, 3 years old at the time, every day at 11:30 at night. I'm going, huh? And what happened is he worked an afternoon shift, but his young son, 3 years old, would always wait at 11:30 for dad to come through the door, and they would go out and do a drive together. A great text-free ritual. And think about the impact that's having on his young son at that young age, and it doesn't involve a screen. These are the type of moments that create connection that a screen will never be able to replace. Drew?
Yeah. Strategy number three is model what you want. The reality is, kids notice. Are we sitting at dinner, checking our email, sneaking it under the table so they don't see? They know what's going on. Are you constantly having your screen in your face while they're trying to talk to you? Like you're, your eyes are on your screen, but you're kind of, they're not on the kids who are talking to you. Are you using screens to manage your stress or to get distracted or to just medicate what you've got going on? So ultimately, you just have to ask yourself this question: Am I demonstrating the habits I want my child to develop? If you are, great. If you're not, what's one area that you might be able to make a shift this week? Over to you, Ed.
Excellent. Excellent. And then teach tech self awareness. So help kids ask, how do I feel after using this app? Also, does this help me relax or make me more stressed? And am I using screens before I'm bored, lonely, or avoiding something? And I really like this approach of asking your children or your kids, what are they using this app for? How does it make them feel? Right? So probing, asking questions is much more effective than having strict rules. So it may be a little bit of a different approach for some dads and fathers and male caregivers, but it's a different way of approaching it instead of just enforcing rules. Let's go to our final segment. The goal isn't less screen time, it's more life. Drew?
Well, the reality is, for some, it might be less screen time, which gives more life. you know, but yes. And so, parents, we might ask the question of how much screen time is too much, right? We're focused on the time. I think, and we're going to propose a better question might be, is my child living a healthier, well managed life? Meaning, does their childhood include healthy things like play, good quality sleep, relationships, movement, learning, downtime, rest? As long as screens can help support all of those things, then I think you're doing well and they're living a more healthy, integrated life. The goal is screens should not be superseding or overtaking or replacing all of those healthy things. And if they are, that's where the adjustments might need to be made.
Excellent. All right, let's do a little recap. So, what we covered today: why are we so worried about screens? Then we talked about what the research actually says. Next up was what kids need more than screen limits. Then practical strategies for dads. And then Drew closed it out with the goal isn't less screen time, it's more life. So, some key takeaways for today's show: don't panic. Technology isn't ruining the entire generation. I know some people think it, but it's not not ruining the entire generation. The relation between screens and well-being is complex. Next up, focus on balance. Sleep, physical activity, relationships, and so school engagement matter more than a single screen time number. Then connection beats control. I like that. Connection beats control. Kids respond better when dads understand their digital world. Number four, model healthy habits. Your relationship with screens teaches as much as your rules. Five, create screen free rituals. Small daily moments of connection have a lasting impact. And then number six, the goal is resilience. So, Drew, before we close it out, what's our resource for our family today?
Our resource is Dad Mentor, our father leader community, and our Connected Dad course. And the reason I say that is because a lot of navigating screens and stress and the impacts on our kids is managing ourselves. And having support, having other dads around you who get it, who can empathize with your frustrations, but also give you practical things that has worked for them, like you can in our community, is powerful. Plus the understanding of how to regulate and manage, as well as communicate and process our own emotions and build real meaningful connection, creating psychological safety, which are the foundations of the Connected Dad course, are, I think, really the most powerful ways we can move the needle in this area of screens and stress.
Excellent. So, I'm going to end off with a question and a reflection. So, my question is, if your child remembers one thing about growing up with you, what do you want it to be? The screen limits you enforced or the connection you created? Because years from now, your children probably won't remember exactly how much screen time they had, but they'll remember whether dad was available, interested, present, and connected. And then finally, your child doesn't need a dad who wins every battle over screens. They need a dad who helps them build a life so rich in connection, purpose, and relationships that screens become just one part of it, not the center of it. So, as always, I want to say thank you so much.
Ed,
Oh,
Ed,
go ahead.
I want to throw one quick thing in before. I've had
Sure.
quite a few conversations with younger men about this idea of screens and limits, and each one of them has said, my parents held back on me getting a cell phone or smartphone. They held back on my engagement with some of this screen stuff, and they have looked back and said with gratitude, I'm so glad my parents did that. So while we're advocating a connected approach, the reality is sometimes making the difficult decision as a parent to hold back, to create limits, to support a healthier choice that your kids may not like in the moment might be the best decision. I'll just leave it with that.
All right. Good closing message from Drew. So, as always, again, thank you for giving the most valuable thing, your time, to hang out with us today. And as always, don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Remember to give yourself grace, and we'll catch you soon. Be well and keep the faith.